to start recording. There we go. All right. And let's go back to my shared screen because it looks like it stopped sharing. Erica, can you give me a thumbs up if you can still see my slide deck?
Yeah, I can still see it.
Great, great. So it's just on my end. And sometimes that's the case with using Teams. I have a hard time navigating myself between windows. So I know that today, as we go back and forth with some activities and the presentation, I'm going to make sure that I practice good wait time to give everybody an opportunity to get to the materials that you'll need, because we will be kind of going back and forth. But I want it to be interactive. I am a facilitator, not a presenter. So the purpose of this session is to introduce you to the digital learning standards for students and then give you the structures and time to interact with them and think about them for yourself and your students. And think about how they'll integrate with your content, because there are a variety of educators that are participating right now in this webinar. And so you all have different content areas that you focus on. And so I hope that this will give you the opportunity to really see how the digital learning standards can integrate with your content. So let me just sit in silence for just a moment so that everybody can access the slides. I'm counting in my head, y'all. I'm practicing my wait time. Okay, so I hope that that has given you the opportunity to get to this slide deck. You're going to find that throughout I will have the link to the slides posted. And also, you know, right now while I'm thinking about it, it would probably be helpful for you if I posted that link in the chat. I have a hard time multitasking, especially in Teams, going back and forth to the chat window, but I'm going to try to do that right now. So let me post that, and it'll be good to have that in the chat too for people who may join us a little bit late. That way they can have it and get to the slide deck quickly. So I've posted that in the chat, and for other times when we're going back and forth, I'll try to remember to do that as well. If I don't, prompt me and just say, hey, can you post that in the chat? And I'll be glad to do that. So some other housekeeping that we need to do is I want to make sure, because I've been talking for a few minutes, will you just type yes in the chat if you can hear me? I know Erica can. I know several of you can. But it'd be good for me to see if everyone can kind of hear me. If you're having problems with your audio, here's what you may want to do. You may want to click on those three dots, then go to device settings and make sure, like right now I'm using my headset, so I have double checked and it shows that my Logitech USB headset is what I'm using for audio. So check and make sure that the correct audio device is selected. If it's not, change it. If that doesn't work, you can try going out of the session and coming back in. Sometimes that works to, you know, any glitches that you might have. Okay. And also type in the chat if you can see my screen. So let me go back to the chat window. Okay, I'm seeing yeses. You can hear and see me. Thank you, Cindy, for that. All right, great. So it looks like most of y'all can see the screen and we are good to go with that. Just a reminder too that we are recording so that those who couldn't participate at this time but can participate at another asynchronous time can benefit from this. So we are recording, and I will stop from time to time to check for questions. You all are welcome to unmute yourselves as well if you want to chime in. Again, it's difficult for me to multitask, so if you type something in the chat and I don't see it, just feel free to unmute and ask me, interrupt me at any time for questions. Before we get into the digital learning standards, I really want to make sure that you have my contact information. I'm Kathy Parker, and I am the Sand Hills Regional Consultant. So for those of you who are based in the Sand Hills, I'm the regional consultant for my division for all things digital teaching and learning for the Sand Hills area. I am also school library media support for the state. So that's how Erica and I, those of you who have been on here and heard me talking to Erica, we know each other through different supports that I have participated in related to school library media across the state. My contact information is here on the slide, so please feel free to follow up with me about anything you need for the digital learning standards or digital teaching and learning related. Now I want you all to introduce yourselves. So I said that I am not a presenter, I'm a facilitator, and I like interaction, and we can have interaction virtually. Like we can face-to-face. It's not exactly the same, but we are blessed to have the technology that allows us to interact virtually. So what I want you to do is in the chat, I just want you to post something to the group that introduces yourself. So you decide what you want to post about yourself. And then I want you to kind of be thinking, get started thinking, activating thinking about digital skills, and just give a couple of statements about how you teach digital skills to your students, regardless of what your subject area is or your grade levels. I know y'all are coming from lots of different backgrounds. Just take a minute to introduce yourself to one another and a couple of statements about how you teach digital skills. And once you do that, then I want you to take a look at what your colleagues have posted so that you kind of get to know them in this digital environment. So I'm going to be quiet again. Something else that I love is that with the virtual environment, of course, we can participate from all across the state. So I see Dare County and Davidson. Great. All right, digital learning specialist. Hi, Felicia. Hi, Tanya. Got STEM represented. Library media represented. Classroom teachers represented. Great. All right. Okay, and Jenny, one of the ways you do digital skills is by partnering with teachers as a library media coordinator. I did the same thing. Collaboration is so important with that. And just to tell you a little bit more about myself and my education background, I was a high school English teacher for about 5 years. And then I went back to school and I got my master's in library media, and I was a library media coordinator at the high school level and also at the elementary school level for about 17 years before joining the Department of Public Instruction as their school library media consultant. So I have worn quite a few hats in education over the years, and I'm actually starting I believe this is my 25th year in education. So 2020 has been an interesting year to be an educator, hasn't it? So thinking about digital skills, I think one of the things that just strikes me about 2020 is just all of the things that have happened and the quick shift to virtual learning and remote instruction has just really reiterated to me and validated how important digital skills are for our students right now and in their futures. So I want to take a few minutes now that you've kind of gotten your mind thinking about digital skills and what you're doing in your own instruction. I want to take a minute to think about, well, what digital skills do we think even need to be incorporated in our instruction? If we're partnering with teachers, what digital skills are we concentrating on? What do we value as far as digital skills for our students? So I have an activity that I want you to do. Again, I mentioned that we're going to be jumping back and forth between some tabs. So we're going to begin by activating our thinking about digital learning in general. And we're going to do that using a resource called an answer garden, which allows us to form word clouds. So on your device, in the tab where you have these slides open, just click on that link for word cloud. And I'm going to go right over here while I'm thinking about it. And I am going to copy and paste this link in the chat too, for anyone who may need to access it there, because we want to see what the group's thoughts are. And so Answer Garden is just, if you have used word clouds in the past, it's just another type of digital resource that helps you to kind of see other people's thoughts. So if you will just type your answer there, and you can submit as many answers. Like I see someone's already submitted online safety. You can see just from me that when I was messing around with Answer Garden and forming it for this, that one of the skills that I thought about was collaboration. So just enter the skills there and submit. What are the digital skills that you think are important to our students right now and in the foreseeable future? And I'm going to be quiet and let you all navigate between your tabs and get to that answer garden. Okay. I'm seeing digital citizenship large and in charge there in the middle with organization. Others agreed, collaboration. So you can see with Answer Garden, like other word clouds that you're probably familiar with, the ones that are very common bubble to the top and get larger. Give everybody about 30 more seconds to submit any final digital skills that you think are important. All right, that digital citizenship, nothing's knocked it out of priority yet. One more time, I'm going to refresh. Okay. Yep, and we still see that digital citizenship has a prominent place in our minds. And then even some of the other skills that you all noted, like online safety, netiquette, I mean, that all kind of is encompassed under digital citizenship. So we'll see in just a minute when we dig into our digital learning standards, that digital citizenship is one of the main anchor standards for North Carolina's digital learning standards for students. So thank you so much for submitting your thoughts there and getting us thinking about what skills we think are important for our students. So let me give you a little bit of context, because in 2018, a steering committee, and I'm going to click right here where it says context. You are welcome on your slides to click there too or follow along just on my shared screen. That's up to you. And it'll take me to the North Carolina Digital Learning Standards website that my division manages for the state. And you can see kind of the timeline of the digital learning standards. And we'll come back to this website in a few minutes to take a look at some of the resources that we have. But back in 2018, when a standards review committee got together and became the steering committee, they kind of did the same thing that we just did. They thought about, well, what are the digital skills that our students need? And this was in 2018. What was important then? What are they going to need for the foreseeable future? Of course, that was pre-COVID. So prior to 2019, our state's digital learning standards were called Information and Technology Essential Standards. And so some of you are probably familiar with those standards, especially for those of you who work directly with instructional technology or library media. But really the intent of those standards, even back in 2009, was that they were standards for all curricular areas. They were not just, we'll think about this a little bit more, but they weren't just standards for technology folks or library media folks. And as part of the standards review process, the steering committee, they included classroom teachers, library media leaders, technology leaders, members of higher education. You know, it was their job to review the information technology essential standards, to look at some other national and state standards and research and think about what would be best for our students in North Carolina moving forward. And so they made a recommendation at that time. After they did all of that, they recommended that North Carolina adopt the International Society for Technology and Education standards. And the State Board of Education agreed and adopted those standards this past summer. So to the committee, ISTE's standards represented the skills that our students really needed in the digital age. And as I mentioned, of course, obviously that was pre-COVID, so having to shift so quickly to remote learning during the pandemic has really reiterated the relevance of these standards. And just incidentally, one of the things that the committee learned when researching these standards was that about 30% of school districts already used the ISTE student standards in some fashion. So that kind of just gives you an idea of how North Carolina's digital learning standards came to be. So of course, since they are our particular standards, that's what we refer to them as, North Carolina's digital learning standards for students. But they are ISTE's standards for students as well. So for the rest of our time together, I hope that we're going to be resources for each other, and we're going to really dig into the standards. And after this session, I hope you'll have a better understanding of what those standards are and possibly connections to your own work and your content areas. So I want to take a couple of minutes and just give you the opportunity to have a brief introduction to the standards from ISTE. Now, I'm using my headset, and I have found that sometimes playing videos in a webinar are problematic with sound and things like that. So instead of me playing this, what I want you to do is on your device, since y'all are all muted, I want you to take, I think this is about maybe 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. So I'm going to be quiet, and I want you to take a minute and just watch this video. And let me get the link and paste it in the chat as well, but you can just click on it for in the tab that where you're following along. But I'll also post it in the chat if that would be helpful. And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, and then we'll come back together. So it's 11:22, so we'll come back together about 11:25. Okay, I hope that that video gave you a brief snapshot of the standards that our state refers to as its digital learning standards. And we're going to dig into them in just a minute. But something that I mentioned already that I was frequently asked about the information technology essential standards and have already been asked about the digital learning standards is, are these the standards for our library media coordinators and technology facilitators? So I want to make sure we take a moment today to just clear up any misconceptions. And like the information and technology essential standards, these standards are intended to be integrated into every content area. They are every content, every curriculum standards. Because we know that digital learning most effectively happens when it's intentionally integrated with our content standards. So, for example, you may be familiar with social and emotional learning standards, which have the same premise. They're intended to be integrated into every content area. The idea is not to have them as standalone standards, but instead for them to be kind of naturally occurring as we teach our specific content standards like ELA or science. And part of our time together will be spent identifying where we can make those natural connections with our content standards. On our digital learning standards website, so I'm going to grab that link and I'm going to put it in the chat, but in your tab or window where you're following along, you can go to this site. Let me put it in the chat too, so some of you have direct access that way. There are several crosswalks that you may be interested in. So I'm going to be quiet again, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to take a look at how the digital learning standards for students relate to some other standards that we are probably all familiar with or becoming more familiar with in this remote environment that we are learning and teaching in. So we have this website that has a variety of resources. There you see the crosswalk link that it took you to. If you are a library media coordinator, you might want to take these next few minutes to look at how the digital learning standards for students relate to and align with AASL, the American Association for School Librarians, standards for learners. As North Carolina educators, we should all know the digital learning competencies for educators, and we have a crosswalk. This will actually prompt you to make a copy of it that shows the intersections between the digital learning competencies for teachers and the digital learning standards for students. And then we also have just recently worked with the division at the Department of Public Instruction and come up with our social emotional learning crosswalk and how the digital learning standards align to social and emotional standards as well. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to give you 5 minutes and then we will come back together. So take the next 5 minutes. So that puts us coming back together at about 11:33, 11:34, and just choose one of these crosswalks to take a look at and see how the digital learning standards relate to other standards and competencies that we have at the state level and the national level. So let's get back together in 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to be coming back together in about 1 minute. All right, so I hope that gave you an opportunity just to kind of start thinking more about the digital learning standards and how they interact and intersect with other standards, state and national level that you are familiar with. So now let's dig into what the actual standards are. And again, I mentioned at the beginning that this was going to be interactive and that I'm really providing you with the structure and the time. And we know time is so precious. The time for you just to kind of explore these standards and better get to know them. So what we're getting ready to do is an activity where you'll actually take a look at ISTE's website and the actual standards, because ISTE has a great glossary that I'm going to show you that's very helpful if terminology is not familiar to you, or if you are trying to educate parents or community members about these standards. ISTE's glossary is very useful. ISTE also has a video playlist for each of the standards, so I'm going to show you that and give you an opportunity to interact with that. On our Digital Learning Standards website, we also have some resources that include grade band indicators, so samples of, generic ideas of what this might look like in practice with students at different grade levels. And then you're going to kind of process all of that and share your thoughts with us. So let me start by showing you what we'll just go through. I'll show you what each of these are, and then I will give you the opportunity to navigate through this yourself on your device. So you are welcome to click in your tab or follow along with me. But ISTE's website has some really valuable resources for the student standards. So you can see that there are 7 standards that are our standards for students. So what you're going to do is just take a few minutes to go through, expand, so you can see the main anchor standards and then all the articulations of the standards. And I want you to just go through for all of the standards, and then I want you to pick one that really resonates with you, that you are passionate about, or immediately as you read it, you say, yes, that is exactly what our students need. Like I see that digital citizen is one of our standards, and that was the skill that you all as a group identified as one of the most important for our students today. So you're going to choose, after looking over all these standards, which one you really want to spend more time with. And you can see, like for Digital Citizen, that there is a playlist. So ISTE has compiled several videos for each of the standard areas, and they're probably about 2 to 3 minutes, where you can actually watch students from a variety of educational settings and a variety of content areas implementing those standards to kind of get an idea of what it looks like in practice. So I'm going to give you time for whichever standard you pick to watch the video playlists to better get to know those standards. And what I mentioned with the glossary, you can see here, you can hover over terminology that may not be familiar to you. And ISTE does a really good job of kind of giving you an idea of what they're talking about, what that means as far as digital learning. So you're going to interact with ISTE's resources here. And then you're going to go click on the link that takes you to this website again, and you're going to see grade band indicators. So for grade band indicators, what you'll notice is that we have them for K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. So when I take a look at, let's just say K2, I'm going to open up this document. And you'll see that for every standard, there are samples. Now, of course, these are samples. This is not an exhaustive list, and they are generic. You know, you can think about how they would apply to your content area. You can think of some of these may be springboards. That's really what this is. This is just a jumping off point for what some of these standards might look like in practice. So some of these may springboard some ideas in your mind about how maybe this is not indicator sample for your content area for your students, but X would be. So hopefully this will get you thinking about what this might look like in your actual grade level with the students that you work with. And then once you have interacted with those resources, you are going to come back and click on the link for the Padlet. And just, of course, this is like digital sticky notes. So you are going to go to the standard that you focused on. Just click on the plus, and that will allow you to just compose your thoughts. What do you wonder about the standard? What really resonated with you about it? What do you want to share about it with other folks? So that's what we're getting ready to do. So while you all are getting started, I'm going to go through and post these links in the chat as well. So there'll be a link to the ISTE website, which has the video playlist, link to the grade band indicators, and also a link to the Padlet. And we're going to take about, let's say about 15 minutes. So we are going to come back together at about 5 till 12. And then I'll kind of judge and see if I look at the Padlet and see that you need a little bit more time, I'll add a little bit more time. But let's target it for about 15 minutes. So we'll come back together at 11:55.
Kathy, could you unlock the Padlet, please?
Thank you so much for letting me know that y'all aren't able to post to that. Yes, I will see what's going on with that real quick. Thank you. All right, and I've unlocked that Padlet, so once you get to that point, you should be able to post your thoughts. Thank y'all for letting me know that needed to be done. Okay, just to give you a heads up, we're going to have about 5 more minutes. I see some of you are posting to the Padlet, so it looks like we've got good timing going on. Take about 5 minutes to collect your thoughts and post, and take a look at what some of your colleagues have posted about the standards they've been focusing on for the last few minutes. Okay, just a heads up, we are getting ready to come back together in another minute or so. Okay, as we are coming back together, make sure you've taken a look at some of the thoughts your colleagues from across the state have posted. Some of your comments that resonated with me, I see in capital letters, I see exclamation points like related to an IB school and student capacity and students being able to persevere with real world problems. I mean, thinking about right now what our world is going through, how important that is, being an innovative part of being an innovative designer, and noting, I see some other comments. It looks like empowered learner and digital citizen really resonated with you all. Got quite a few for computational thinker. So I hope this has given you an opportunity to kind of dig into the standards a little bit. Is there anyone who wants to unmute themselves and make a comment about what you observed or about what you posted in the Padlet? I want to give you an opportunity if you choose to voice it related to what you've just seen with the standards. Y'all have me really practicing my wait time. Well, that's great. I know that I don't know if you're tired of hearing my voice and you want another voice heard, so feel free to unmute yourself at any time. But I appreciate you all taking the time to think about the ones that really resonate with you and posting about those. That's going to help for what we're going to do next, I think, because while there are standards that resonate with us, there are probably ones that you saw that you thought, that seems like it would be challenging for me or challenging for my students. And so we're going to take a few minutes to think about some of these standards that are challenging and how we can possibly integrate them in our content areas and help each other with the challenges. So there's a little bit of redundancy here, but I'm purposeful with it because I wanted you to take a minute to kind of have a structure to think through one of these standards that resonates with you, and then apply that same structure to thinking about one that you think will be really challenging for yourself in implementing with your students. Or it may not, you feel like you may, looking at the grade band indicators, you are already implementing it with your student, or you may have ideas of ways to implement it with your students, but you think your students may have difficulty with it. So you can come at this as yourself looking through your lens or thinking about your students. So I want you to do the same thing, follow the same process. We're not going to take as much time. We're only going to take 10 minutes for this one. But now I want you to identify the standard that you think is going to be the most challenging and take a few minutes to interact with it. Look at the video playlist, review the grade band indicators for that particular one. And I have a Padlet which should be unlocked. I see somebody has already posted a thought to that Padlet. But I feel like this is something that we really need to think about too, with not just the ones that we're passionate about, but the ones that can be challenges for us as well. So doing the same thing, thinking about one that challenges you, interact with it, look at some of the resources, then come back and post to this Padlet. What is challenging to you about it? What do you wonder about it? And then we're going to see if any of our colleagues maybe have ideas of ways that can make it less challenging, or they can help you with that. So I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes. Let's see. It is right at 12 o'clock. So we're going to come back in, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So we're not going to have as long. So just take a look at a couple of videos in the playlist, look at the grade band indicators for one that's challenging for you. Then we'll come back together in 10 minutes. So that'll be at 10 minutes after 12. So in your last 5 minutes of thinking about the standard that seems a little bit challenging, take a couple of minutes there at the end to look at what your colleagues have posted and see if there is a comment that really resonates with you. One that has already resonated with me was the comment about building perseverance has to start before technology implementation. And that really spoke to me because the digital learning standards are not just about technology, right? They are learning standards. Yes, they relate to technology, and in many cases, you're using technology to implement the standards, but they are skills that can be applied to any content area and don't have to use technology. Building perseverance is very important prior to technology implementation. So take a couple of minutes here at the end and look at what some of your colleagues have posted, and feel free to post about their comments. Or if you have an idea, if there is a resource, like if you have a suggestion for the introvert who has posted about global collaboration being difficult and roadblocks that students may face, if there is a resource that you might have for that person, post it there in the global collaborator column. I'm just going to give you all the last couple of minutes to wrap up and to be resources for each other. Okay, take this last minute to finish anything that you are typing in the Padlet or reading that your colleagues have posted. And then feel free to unmute if you want to comment about what you've seen so far. Okay, I hope that this has kind of provided you the structure to be thinking about these standards. Which ones you think would be relatively easier for you to implement with your students, maybe because they resonate with you or you're passionate about them, or maybe an area of your expertise, and which ones you may have to be more intentional about integrating with your content area because they may be challenging for you, like the introvert who admitted that as being an introvert, it makes it more challenging to encourage our students and help our students with being global collaborators. I think it's really important to be self-reflective like that and acknowledge that some of these standards will be a challenge. But as educators, I mean, the very fact that you all are educators means you are passionate about learning and teaching. And so we know that we will figure out ways to overcome those challenges to meet the needs of our students. So I hope this has been beneficial for you in thinking about these standards. Now, we are running out of time, so I am going to modify what we were getting ready to do, but I want to make sure you know that this is available. We're going to think about reflecting how this can inform our work moving forward with these standards, specifically about connecting with our content. But I'm going to change this just a little bit. So just so that you know for the future, if you would like to use a specific structure that I've created, I've just created a very simple, basic Google Doc that you are welcome to make a copy of. It's a forced copy. So it'll ask you to make the copy, and basically it's just a way for you to organize thinking about the digital learning standards and your content area, where they would intersect. So as you are thinking about how you will implement and integrate these standards with your students, if you would like to use this, feel free to make a copy for yourself, and you can use that to kind of organize your thoughts. But since we are short on time and I have to do a little bit of housekeeping at the end so that you get credit for your participation today, let's just take a moment to reflect and think about and post in the chat. Think about your specific content area or your role, if you're a library media coordinator or a digital learning coach. What is one connection that you already see with your work, whether it's thinking about a lesson that you have coming up that you may modify now and add a digital citizenship component to it, or thinking about a resource that comes to mind when you're thinking about being an innovative designer. What kind of connection does that have to your content area? And let's just share out in the chat. So just take a couple of minutes to process that. Think about connecting with your content. How do these standards, any of these standards, connect with your content, or how will you connect them in the future? And just post that in the chat. Post your thought in the chat. Okay, so Cindy's pointing out NC Wise Owl. Yes, NC Wise Owl is a great resource. There are more sessions on NC Wise Owl and NC Bold. So if you have never heard of NC Wise Owl, check out Cynthia Sartain's sessions on it. That's a great resource, especially for things like Knowledge Constructor, getting digital content for your classroom, working with your ITF on these standards. That is something that I posted in the Padlet for our introvert friend for like global collaboration. Oops, my alarm's going off to let me know it's almost time. For our friend who is the introvert, thinking about colleagues that you have, resources, the human resources that you have. Whether they are in your building or virtual, that you reach out to them, like media, library media coordinators or instructional technology facilitators, or your colleagues in your PLCs that can help you with any of these standards. We are definitely not in this alone. All right, and Cosby, you're working on a presentation for your staff. Feel free to reach out if there's any way I can support you with that. Yes, use your friends wisely. Good thought there. Okay, so I appreciate you spending the time better getting to know the digital learning standards. Again, my contact information is here. If you need to follow up with me, please feel free to do so. There is one more thing you need to do to get your credit of completion for this session. And that is, I think I'm going to have to go on my presentation slides. Here we go. Got to move this out of the way. If you have your device with the app, you scan the QR code. If you don't have the app or you are not able to scan this code, you have some kind of issue with it, there on the slide is also a link that you can click on and fill out the information and submit it so that you your participation is noted for this session. So I'm going to leave that up there for you. You have the slide deck that contains it as well. Just move that green block out of the way so that you have the code. And I hope that this was useful for you and that our paths will cross again soon, whether it be virtually or when it's safer to be face-to-face. Thank you so much for joining this session. Thank y'all.